And now, live from Smoke on the Water in Greenville's West End, here is Straight Up with Sturge with Mark Sturgis.
All righty, welcome back in. 8:05 on this Monday night edition of Straight Up with Sturge, coming to you live from Smoke on the Water. Mark Sturgis, Price Atkinson, and let's go straight to the guest line. Let's bring on Dave Baker. Dave, you're somebody that is a Bama boy here, and Price being a Kentucky boy. Are you the godfather of SEC basketball at this point between your work for WKYT in Lexington, ESPN Regional, Fox Sports South, and Raycom Sports, and everything else that you do?
No. I'd just be a capo in the Army.
Well, I tell you what, let's start. We look forward. We sit here. We're the flagship station of Clemson Athletics, but we sit here in an SEC state as well. What is the give us the state of the union, in your opinion, of SEC basketball for 2013, 2014. And could this potentially be a 3-bid league, or do you see them maybe getting a 4th and possibly a 5th when all's said and done?
Well, first of all, anytime I've got the opportunity to be on with Price, I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than that in the Commonwealth. And then to be in the middle of Clemson country as well. But I would say this, and I tell people this all the time at this time of year, and this isn't just announcer speak, but there is still plenty of time for people to play their way into a bid or play their way out of a bid. Now, as far as the SEC goes, it's interesting. There is a big marquee presence in the league. Game a couple of weeks ago, and some people took me to task, and that's okay. But it's as you got to hear the whole thing in context. What I said was, much like Pete Maravich was when he played, that right now, in my opinion, Marshall Henderson is the one guy that you would come out and pay money to see. And Henderson's got his own issues and everything, and we could talk for a whole show about that. I like the kid personally. But he's the one guy you'd come out to see. I mean, Florida has played great basketball, and I think they're only going to get better now that Walker's in there. But they don't really have a lot of star power. Cal, the expectations are so high with the one-and-dones that you lose a few games in the pre-conference, and all of a sudden people think, well, they're not going to be a factor this year. Some of the other teams, I think Georgia has been a big surprise. Not a lot of people thought about that. Ole Miss is the defending conference tournament champ. But some of the traditional teams in the SEC that have traditionally played well. Conzo Martin is a really good basketball coach. Excitement level is not there at Tennessee the way it was when Bruce Pearl was there. And then Alabama, had a run of really successful basketball under C.M. Newton, under Wimp Sanderson, and under David Hobbs. And I thought that Anthony Grant was a great hire. And they have not performed the way a lot of people thought that they were going to. And at the same time, Arkansas, everybody thought that they were going to get back to where they were under Nolan Richardson when his top assistant, Mike Anderson, came back home. And they have not gotten there yet. So I think you've had some coaching turnover. I think you've got a lot of young players. And then, you've had some guys miss on some people. So I think the league is maybe better than people give it credit for. Certainly not where they want it to be.
Dave, Price Atkinson sitting in with Mark Sturgis tonight. Incredibly honored for you to join us, and it's just such a treat to talk to you on air and get to talk SEC basketball, something that you and I and Mark both really love and enjoy. But let me take a step back before we work down to some of the, quote, bubble teams. Everybody thought going into the season that this was basically a Florida-Kentucky fight at the top for the conference championship, and nothing has changed to make anybody think otherwise. Florida's got probably, without a doubt, their toughest week of the season coming up. They go to Tennessee, I believe it's tomorrow night, and then they come to Rupp for the 9 o'clock game day game on Saturday. We'll find out real quick if they're going to be tagged with a loss. And then you obviously have Kentucky sitting at 8-2. Do you think there's anything that's going to change between now and the end of the season for Kentucky possibly to maybe catch Florida? Because it looks like, I think, in my mind, Kentucky's schedule looks really favorable on the way out, outside of your 2 games against Florida.
Well, It does, but the way things would change, and that's another thing. You know, those great conference matchups, you know, have not happened yet. And the top three teams in the league, and I took a look at standings earlier today. It's Florida, Kentucky, and then Ole Miss is either a game or a half game back. And what you're going to find there is that those teams play each other twice, all within the last month of the season. Ole Miss was here in Lexington last week, but they've still got to play Florida twice. Florida has to play Ole Miss twice and Kentucky twice down the stretch. So, yeah, there's still a lot to be determined.
Yeah, and I've liked Florida all season. I'm not changing my Final Four pick on Florida just yet. I still think Kentucky finds a way to. I don't think they're going to make the second weekend of the tournament with these guys. Just too young. But going down to really that second level, and you're talking, bubble's the word that starts becoming, right in everybody's basketball lingo this time of year come mid-February. And I'm looking at kind of a crop of really about 4 teams, and Ole Miss and LSU, Tennessee, and Missouri in there, although Missouri's sitting at 4-6, along with Arkansas at 4-6 in the conference. Missouri seems like they're one of the most capable, and I think they're going to find a way in as one of the last few teams. What do you think about this crop of teams that's really fighting to get into the tournament? And one of the issues, that you hear talked about too, Dave, is, the lack of the opportunity as a whole to get that quality win in the SEC outside of, Florida and Kentucky.
Right. Well, that is a point of conversation. But if you're saying that everybody else is good or getting better, then, what is actually a quality win? The thing with Arkansas is, and I didn't mention Missouri earlier, and I should have, although I think a lot of people didn't think they were going to have quite the run that they've had so far, even though it hadn't been great because they lost so much last year. Arkansas comes back into the picture now. I saw them on Saturday win at Vanderbilt. And, that's another team, that's been really, really good. And they're like middle of the pack this year, but because of suspensions and injury, they're down to 7 scholarship. Prior to the Vanderbilt game on Saturday, Arkansas and Mike Anderson had only won 2 games on the road in the conference, and those were 2 wins at Auburn. So that was really the sticking point for people with Arkansas. But they've got it. They now, their RPI is high enough. I like Ole Miss. I don't understand why RPI is so low. I saw them. They had a tough loss at home against Xavier, one of those teams with a national profile, if you will. And there is room. I think, you have got Kentucky and Florida and Missouri who are in there, and I think you've got the opportunity, in my opinion, for a couple of more to play their way in.
We're talking with Dave Baker. You can follow him on Twitter at BuzzBaker. Works with WKYT in Lexington, not to mention Fox Sports South, ESPN, Raycom, and the SEC Digital Network as well. Dave, I have to ask you about locally. South Carolina in the SEC, rough year, sitting at 1-9, 8-15. This is year number 2 of Frank Martin. What do you make of this? Because I think he's starting to – Frank Martin's a man that doesn't like to lose, and I believe you're starting to see a little frustration on his face at this point of year number 2.
Well, if you're going to see frustration on Frank's face, you're going to know it because he's not going to hide it. But he's working at it. He's working at it. And I was coming back from doing a women's game last night. And at 10 o'clock at the Atlanta airport, ran into Frank, who was out, running down players. I think Frank will do a good job. I heard you say something about the Clemson job in the last hour when I got the email about the phone number mix up, and that is, and I'm gonna edit it just a little bit when you talk about changing coaches. What I have always said is, if you're gonna make a change, you better know who you want, and you better know you can get them.
That's right.
Or else you get Billy Gillispie.
Hey.
That's just what it is. Now I'm a little partial, but because I've known Darren Horn since he was in high school, and he was actually an outfielder for the station softball team one summer when his brother was interning with us. But you're judged by your performance, and Darren knows that, and he's doing work with ESPN now. I think he'll be back in coaching. I think Frank will do a really good job, but there was no natural connection for Frank in South Carolina.
Yep.
So he's got to overcome that. There was no natural connection for Billy Gillispie in Kentucky. He was the flavor of the day. And, people, they were hoping that Tubby could do some things on a much more consistent basis. They knew they wanted it to happen on a more consistent basis, but they didn't really what they wanted. And so that's what happened. So I think you've got a lot of programs. Mississippi State, Scott Strickland, the AD there, was here in Lexington when Price was around. And Scott's a great guy. He's going to do a great job, is doing a great job as the AD there. But, despite all that stuff that went down with the fabulous Renardo Sidney, Rick Stansberry and Richard Williams had done a really good job there for a long time. And now Greg comes in, And again, is there a natural connection? No. But, he's busting his tail trying to get it done. So I think that's part of where the league is, too.
Dave, before we get to I have to ask you about Kentucky before we go. But, we're talking about coaches in the SEC. Two coaches, I think, right now, at least in my mind, outside of Billy Donovan, the great job he's done, I think what Mark Fox has done at Georgia and Kevin Stallings have done at Vandy this year, to have their teams at 6-4 and 5-5 is absolutely off the charts, incredible. But looking at some coaches who've been in the league, a couple who you just mentioned, I'm kind of curious, have you heard anything, their names talked about possibly next year, maybe coming back into league somewhere in Bruce Pearl and Rick Stansberry?
Stansberry, I'm not making this up now. He's running like a water park. He's bought some land and he's got like a water park outside of Starkville. Happier than you can imagine. I'm not saying he won't get back into coaching, but I would be very surprised. And I've known Rick since we were both in college. We were both NAI guys from up here in Kentucky at those small schools. Bruce Pearl's definitely going to be coaching next year. There is no question about it. Had a chance to talk to him in the Charlotte airport a couple of Saturday nights ago when we were coming back from gigs, and he 150% he'll be coaching. And somebody will get a good coach,
Absolutely.
And somebody will get somebody that brings a lot of excitement to that program and to that fan base. It's not the right for everybody, but every time there's a situation like a Bobby Petrino situation, it makes it easier for the next person in that situation to come back and have the opportunity to rehabilitate themselves professionally.
Well, before we let you go, Dave, I did want to, make sure we touch on Kentucky. And you're there in Lexington at WKYT. You're around the program. You're in the SEC. Talk to me about where Kentucky is at this point in mid-February. Are they playing the type of basketball that you think Coach Cal wants them to be playing? On the defensive end, I feel like that's where, there's, I don't want to say a hole, but that's where it could be taken to another level. And some of these young freshmen committing to playing the kind of defense, in the half-court set. What is your take on where Kentucky is right now with all the talent? What kind of steps do you think they can take between now and the SEC tournament and moving out of the SEC tournament into the NCAA tournament?
Well, let me say a couple of things. Coaches are always complaining about guys not being ready to play what they consider to be SEC-level defense. So one thing I want to say right off the bat is that nobody can do that now. This whole emphasis on freedom of movement, and I'm not knocking it or anything, but, you just can't play defense the way most people want to play defense anymore. So for all the freshmen that can't play defense, I've said it's an easy adjustment now. In my mind, I think this Kentucky team is about where I thought they would be. They had a difficult pre-conference schedule. They play those matchup games with Michigan State. They had the Ice Bowl up there against Baylor. They had that home court win against Louisville. Yeah, they're gonna have some missteps along the way, but they're about where I thought they would be. Now, end of the season, you get Florida twice, you get some of this stuff, you find out exactly where you're going to be. I think they've got to get more consistent play from the guard spot. And if they do that, I don't think there's anybody out there, including Boeheim, who I think is a really great guy and who's done a sensational job. There's nobody that's just a real stick-out out there this year. And Eddie Sutton, when he was here, used to say all the time, you know, in a series, and this is what reason the NBA does it. In a series, the team is going to win, you know, about 80% of the time. One game, anything happens. Anybody can get whacked in a one-game deal. So I still think they've got as good a shot as anybody, and I don't think they're nearly as vulnerable as they were last year. Now, that being said, are they as good as they were 2 years ago? Absolutely not.
Well, Dave, as always, a pleasure to be with you. I've got one question. Do you remember Ed Hull?
Yes.
He sends
I'm
his
sorry?
best. I said, do you remember president of JP Sports by the name of Ed Hull?
Oh, absolutely. Godfather. Now, that's the Godfather.
That's the Godfather. Well, that's a family member of mine, and he sent his best when he saw that you were coming on with us. Said, treat my boy Dave Baker well. So Ed Hull sent his best.
Tell him I said hello. There were many nights in advance of the SEC tournament where Ed would have a dinner for all of us, and
Yes.
Tom Hammond, who is doing the Olympics this week for NBC, is a wine connoisseur. And ask Ed sometime about the hurting that Tom could put on a credit card with his once-in-a-year selection of the vino.
All right, I will do. But, yeah, Ed said to make sure I told you hello, and he misses seeing you. So, Dave, I'd love to get with you before the end of the season. I hope the weather's good on y'all, because we're getting ready to start getting stomped on about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Good on you all. Oh, my gosh, I was talking to the guy at the smoothie place a second ago. We had like 5 days in the 60s in February last year, and today was the 10th day that the kids have been out of school. We got like 3 inches last night. We're supposed to get more this weekend. So we're right there with you, boys.
All right. Thank you much, Dave.
Thank you,
Look forward to
Dave.
talking to you soon.